to the Kansas State Department of Education's Insight Podcast, where we explore the people, policies, and progress shaping education in Kansas. In this episode, we dive into how kids really learn to read, how Kansas schools are supporting that work, and what you can do at home to help your child become a strong reader.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KSDE Insight Podcast. We are so happy you join and you subscribe, you listen to us every month. And if you're a new subscriber or just a new listener, we ask you to subscribe to the Insight Podcast, where you're going to get a lot of information about this broad topic of education and schooling. And we hope that it educates parents and educators, and we hope to just have a discussion across our state of Kansas around how can we help young people become successful. So many ways to do that, and so many challenges to do that, whether we're a parent or an educator or a guardian trying to help raise kids. And we've had some wonderful topics over the last several months. Last month we talked about rigor and how we actually raise academic rigor in schools. And if you haven't listened to that, it's wonderful with two Kansas superintendents that are really knocking it out of the park. But today we're going to talk about a really fundamental skill. And it's one, I think you talk, anyone that's had a child, you think about this really at a young age, it's reading. And how do I help my son or daughter or my first grader, if I'm a teacher, or a ninth grader that's struggling, how do I help them learn to read? And is it more than just reading to people? So anyway, we have some experts here that are going to share with you about that journey, both as a parent, grandparent, and as teachers. And so I would just like to go around, and we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Randy Watson, Commissioner of Education. And again, thank you for tuning into the KSDE Insight Podcast this month to learn all things around literacy. So, Jennifer.
And I'm Jennifer Hansen. I am a district ELA specialist in Geary County and also a TLC for KSDE.
And Jennifer, we're gonna just because we have so many parents listening, we're gonna say ELA is English Language Arts,
yes.
And TLC is
Teacher Leader Consultant.
Yeah, that's going to be really important because
Yes.
we all know what that
Yes.
means, but for some of our listeners, they may not know.
My name's Lori Curtis. I'm the Early Literacy Dyslexia Program Manager at Kansas State Department of Education. And I was a classroom teacher, mainly in primary grades, for 15 years, and on faculty at K-State for 14 years. And I have been at KSD for about 4 years now, almost 4 years, and take a lot of joy out of leading some of the literacy initiatives for Kansas.
Yeah, and both of you are doing remarkable work. And so I'm a reformed social studies teacher, so I didn't actually teach reading, but I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and kids are wonderful, Jennifer, but grandkids are the bomb. So and so we become a different animal. And so the 4-year-old, I'm all about what's the best way to help her become a great reader, among other things. So let's just dive in. And I want to start with some terms that get thrown out and that parents may hear, educators may hear, and there may be a ton of confusion because I think sometimes there's misinformation, not intentionally. But I'm going to use a term, the science of reading. And I may even talk about that in structural literacy, but let's start with the science of reading. People are going to hear that term. I would be interested to know, what do you want people to know from your perspective? What is the science of reading?
I would love to start with that
Okay,
question.
all right.
Because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding about what that is, because it is a body of research. It isn't a program, it isn't a specific way of teaching. It's a body of research that has been accumulating for over 50 years. But it's also not about just reading, it's reading and writing. It is also important to know it's about intervention of reading difficulties, but also prevention of reading difficulties. And it's information that has been drawn together from all different types of research, educational, psychology, neuroscience. So it's a body of research that helps us know how kids learn to read and how they learn to write and how we can help them learn to read and write better.
Okay. Jennifer, anything you want to add from your perspective?
I think what has really been most helpful for myself as a parent and as a teacher educator is knowing that how the brain learns to read and why some students struggle. That has just been absolutely amazing to see. If one aspect of the brain is not working, then and we can build that aspect of it and work on the strengths of the other sets, we can help that student.
Jennifer, that's so good, I think, both for educators and parents, because I think it's that 50 years that we're talking about the research. There was also another side of of research that was saying kids learn to read by exposure to print and exposure to language. And so I'd like for you just to talk about that, because not saying there's not some truth to that, but not all kids, it doesn't come natural, and yet for me it did. It seemed to be just something that my mother read to me, and we did nursery rhymes, and all of a sudden I'm in text. Can you help explain that difference, either one of you?
So I like to think of it as you start off, there's researcher Aries phases, and she talks about the phases of reading. And even at the youngest phase, we can see kids reading. They're running past a store and they see a Target sign, and they say, that's Target, that's beginning reading. And I think we have to work with those students and start strengthening those things. Yes, we used to think we put a book in front of a student, they read it multiple times, they're going to read it. But what we learned a lot is they're memorizing it. So when they get into the older grades, we were able to see when you gave those multisyllabic words with multiple syllables, they weren't able to read those.
Wow.
So that was a true insight for me, since teaching gen ed and special ed, opening up a whole new life, knowing I had to make sure that they were sounding out the words and being exposed to all types of oral language.
So you may have thought that kindergarten or first grader, as a teacher, that student's reading, and I'm coming home and mom and dad said, oh, I think that student's reading. And then by fifth grade or fourth grade, sixth grade, all of a sudden something doesn't seem right. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Wow, you see that too, Lori?
I do, and part of that has to do with the type of print we put in front of kids. A lot of children's books are very predictable, and kids can memorize them easy and repeat them back. And there's nothing wrong with repeatedly reading a book that's a favorite. But to do reading instruction, we need to make sure that we aren't encouraging kids to just memorize the text and put it back to us, but they're actually able to decode the words as they get into school.
Okay, so it's okay then to my 4-year-old granddaughter that I read Goodnight Moon over and over and over again, because it's one of my favorites. So I got to make sure it's one of her favorites.
Well, it is, because you're helping them understand a sense of story. It isn't that you're teaching them to read, but they're learning there's a beginning of a story and an ending, and there's a plot line. They're learning all of the joy that comes with hearing a book. So there's a time for just loving literature and just loving that opportunity to read to students, and then there's a time when we do instruction that occurs in school.
Okay, so now, reading and early literacy really important. Jennifer, you mentioned that it's just not enough, though, to have this exposure to print. Talk to me and our listeners about, then what is it? Where's the magic sauce in the science? What have we learned from the science of reading that says, okay, I'm just not going to say Target, or Goodnight Moon over and over. What is it that has to happen early on, and just from birth to age 5, for reading to have the most success and the opportunity to read?
I would just really like to highlight the importance of oral language development that starts at birth, if not before. So the opportunity that children have the first time they hear an utterance from anyone who's caring for them, and they respond and people react to what that cooing is, all of that starts to generate an understanding for a child that I can communicate. I am able to communicate my needs and my wants. And then as more and more language is developed, they can do that better and better and be more specific in what they need. But the value of oral language can't be, I think it's underestimated. I think we really need to make sure that as families, we understand how vital that is for us to talk with our children, to expose them to the world, to be able to talk about what they see, and just really build a strong foundation for oral language before they enter school, because that is the foundation of what they will read.
Great. Jennifer, we have a great program. It's one of the most things I love about our agency. That is, you can bring your child to work for the first 6 months. And so right now, even on our floor, we have 3 infants. And what I notice is we have a lot of grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles, and there's a ton of oral language. A ton, because the minute mom gets tired or has to do some work, someone else has the baby and it now is engaging again. And that oral language development is so prevalent. I just watched that in our agency. Can you talk to that a little bit too, about what you maybe see if you're a kindergarten teacher in the early grades and that hasn't happened, or even as a parent, your perspective on that oral language development?
Oh, I would agree. It is completely important. I can remember when I first moved to Kansas, and there was an infomercial about oral language, and it was a mom and a little boy at the grocery store. And it's usually what you see a lot of times is they're holding a phone or holding an iPad. But this mom was showing, oh, look, this is a tomato. Can you say tomato? And using all the proper nouns and of the vegetables and different things. How does it feel? And I was just like, that is where it all begins. And when they get into kindergarten, that's when we actually have that as one of our standards, is the oral language, the speaking and listening, and carrying on a conversation with someone and being able to go to the kitchen and play kitchen with their friend and make orders and do all of that. That is so important for our students, because one thing I always tell the teachers I work with, if they can't say it, they're not going to be able to write it. And so that correlation, even with oral language to writing.
Excellent. And so, okay, so we've talked about 50 years of research. We want oral language development. And I hear from kindergarten teachers and pre-K teachers all the time, kids are coming to school with less oral language development than what I used to see, these veteran teachers. Tell me why that is. I mean, parents are busy, grandparents or caregivers are busy, but what's happening? What's going on?
Part of this will be research, part of this will be opinion.
Okay.
I really believe that as we've gotten busier, young families have gotten busier, have a lot more options. A lot of the time that we used to spend around a dinner table and times just at home engaging in conversation has dropped. And I think a lot of the compensation is putting students and children, young children, in front of educational television that appears to be great, but it is one-sided. There is just a receptive vocabulary, receptive information coming in, and the child isn't able to take turns in conversation and build oral
So the people listening, Oreo, I mean, setting a child, let's use old technology now, in front of Sesame Street.
Right.
Appears to be really good. Sesame Street's well researched, it's very developmental, and you look at the lesson and you go, wow, that's pretty good. But what is it not doing for the child?
So what needs to happen alongside Sesame Street is for an adult to watch with that child and then engage in conversation about what do you see and what did you learn, and having an opportunity, because it's all information coming in and not giving the child an opportunity
So if dad's cooking and not paying any attention, we're not getting the interaction. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I've noticed with my own grandchildren is often when they're taking someone to soccer or they're going someplace, a lot of our conversation becomes very abrupt, like take this, open this, don't spill that, very command oriented, and that's just normal, trying to survive going through a drive-through, having a meal, right, on the way to a practice. And some of what is missing is longer sentence structure, ways that we use to converse when we're playing a board game or around a table. So I think really just trying to be intentional about when we do have a conversation with a child that it's rich. It's not just that stilted, command-driven, trying to survive, going through the drive-through opportunity that we often have with our kids.
Jennifer, you talked about maybe in a grocery store, this is a tomato, this is the feeling of a tomato. This is the color of a tomato, and having that interaction. So that sounds so simple. Why aren't we doing that more? What's getting in the way?
I think it's back to what kind of Lori said. We're just busy. People are like, I've got to get in the grocery store and get out. So you just sit there, be good. Let me get out real quick, and that way we can get home, make dinner, because then maybe for a lot of parents, I have to go to my second job. And I think if we just slow down just for a moment and just have that one conversation, even in the car, did you see what I picked up? What was your favorite thing I bought? Anything like that. That's a great way to have that communication. If you're in that hurry, you've got the drive from your house or your walk from your house to the grocery store and back.
Yeah, that's great. It's just kind of slow down just to be in the moment a little bit, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if either one of you, I think it was a Snickers commercial that used to run a few years ago, Betty White, and there was a football and then she got tackled. That is a little bit of exaggeration how my wife behaves in Walmart when she sees a toddler with a tablet. Okay, you can imagine this, right? Because she's like, no. Or we get in the car and then immediately a tablet happens. Just talk about the street signs or the trees or the conversation, right? And so it sounds so simple, but it has to be living in that moment and interaction with young people. Because if they don't get that oral language, then they can't write, they can't transition. Is that correct?
That is so correct. I even make, my youngest is a freshman, and we pick up one of his friends every morning to go to school, and they're both wanting to text each other. I'm like, put that down. How's your day today? What happened at football? My son plays soccer. And I just make them talk to each other, and they're laughing instead of, we're in the car. Why are you texting each other?
I think it's so common. And because sometimes we've gotten to think that a quiet child is the goal. Like if you go into a restaurant and they're being entertained by a phone or a tablet or whatever that might be, that's the best of the world, right? Is they're quiet, they're behaved, they're not bothering anyone else. But I think back to the times where we were talking about, let's circle all look at that placemat they gave us. Like, let's find all of these shapes. Let's look at all of that. Let's look at the menu. Let's have some opportunity. And yes, it's a little more challenging. Same way with car rides. It's very easy to find technology that will keep a child quiet. Just this last weekend, we were coming home in the car, and I had my 4th grade grandson. And immediately, and he isn't on a device often, but he knows I have a phone. So he's like, can I have your phone? I'm like, let's figure out some of these alphabet games we used to play. So we did that, and actually it was really fun. And my husband joined in it too. So it sometimes just means an intentional thought about how to really, level up that language that you have, and opportunities for kids to talk and explore language. And I learned he's got really high level vocabulary. He was coming up with some really great words, which was an opportunity I had to really praise him on what he was doing and things he had come up with on our game. But I also think about cooking, because cooking's something a lot of us always have to do. You have to go home and make supper. And I thought about, I used to do a lot of cooking in my kindergarten classroom, and talked with parents about just when you're doing your cooking and you have your child in there, that you're stirring things. But you can talk about, do you want a spoon or do you want a whisk? What's a whisk? Well, this is a whisk. This is what we would do, just the vocabulary building that can come alongside just even making dinner.
Yeah, so important. It seems so simple, but we've talked about being in the moment, but that's hard for people. You're working and they're just thinking, you picked up your kids, and they're coming from soccer or football practice, or they're coming from school. You're thinking, I got to get home and I got to make dinner, and this is happening. I got this tonight, and there's so much going through the adult brain that sometimes we're not engaging. And then, and you're right. And if the child's quiet and compliant, everything's great, because I guarantee you, if there's a tablet or a phone in their hand, they're going to be quiet. It's engaging. But is it horrible? No, it's just a one-way communication, and we really need that to be two-way. I was in a school district yesterday that had this year banned cell phones, and they said, the first week, this is K-12, was really hard. Then after that, the kids loved it. Like, the kids are playing board games at lunch, which they never did because they don't have a device that they can go to. So very similar context.
And we have that in our 6 through 12. And this is the first time first year that it's really being enforced at the high school. And that is exactly what our principal's done. We have a few pool tables, they have board games, and the teachers just talk about how much more engaged the students are, work completion. I mean, I know it's the beginning of the year, but it's going off a really great start.
You know, I'd like to say, boy, my mom got it right. She didn't even probably know. Get outside, just go do something, right? And then that you just had to do things on your own. You had to engage with people. There's such a development even through adolescent time that is hard to replicate those hours that you get that. All right, so now we have kids in school. So we've kind of taken them in the early grades. Now they're in kindergarten, first grade. And we wanted to move now from oral language to really the print. And I recognize the letter A and put the letter A, and that's going to be apple, and etc. Tell us how we do that in the science of reading stuff. What does that look like? Take me through a sample type of lesson that would be done in school and maybe even could be done at home.
Well, in my district, in elementary especially, we follow the structured literacy template that was put out a long time ago by the state, and we follow that. So the teachers they're working with the sounds, and then they move from the sounds to the letters.
So just to interrupt, so do we start just with the sound of what sound A? Do we show the letter A, or do we actually just start with?
When we're doing it, we're working on just that, what they call phonemic awareness. So just the sound. So
just the sound.
Just the sound at that part. And the students are interacting with the sounds, and they're maybe deleting letters, inputting letters, adding a consonant to the beginning or consonant to the end. So they're working on that oral first. That's really what they're doing. And then they move into more of the print and sound. And so now they're doing both together. It's kind of like a practice for them. And they're going in and they're introducing that letter. They're talking about what letter it is, the sound it makes, how it's written, what's the shape of that letter, and how do we write an A? How do we write a lowercase a? Then they're going into where they're looking at words that might have an A sound. And they're noticing those. Since we do standards grading and we're looking right at the standard, I tell teachers, anywhere you can find a word that has a short A in it, in your science book, your social studies book, your math book. So they're trying to recognize words with those sounds in that pattern. Then that's when, after that, they kind of get into a reading. And it's phonics based. It is kind of repetitive, but we're trying to get them to learn that sound and see words with that sound. And then they'll go into some vocabulary. So that's, and we have small groups. So teachers are using the data that they've done formative assessments on and just checks. And so then they group their students based on that. And those groups are very fluid. And that means they just move around a lot. You're not in this group for an entire week.
It's not the bluebird and the buzzards.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
Just want to make sure for
it is
those maybe remember a different generation.
Yes. I used to hate when those birds came out. But it's very fluid. Just because you're with this group today, you could be with another group tomorrow. And those small groups are focusing on that tier 1 instruction. That's pretty much how we run a lesson. In pretty much K through 5th grade. What time you spend on it, that's what I get. How much time should I spend? Or do I have to do every part every day? The time may change, but you do have to do every part every day. And I think that's when we talk about structured literacy and the science of reading. There's not one part that's more important than another part. They all help that student to read.
Back to school is the perfect time to set healthy routines that help kids succeed at home and in the classroom. Consistent bedtimes, a good breakfast, and a set morning schedule make it easier to get out the door on time. Healthy habits at home lead to better attendance and better success at school. Let's make every day count this school year.
That's really great, Jennifer. But hey, Lori, but I already know this. It's apple, ant. I got it down. I'm ready to read. So why do I have to spend time on this?
Once you have a skill mastered, then you apply it. You make sure that one thing, what Jennifer described was the beginnings of a structured literacy lesson. Because once we have that explicit instruction, and structured literacy is explicit, it's very systematic, but it's also diagnostic. We make sure that we use data to know what kids know and what they don't know, and we don't keep them learning things that they already know. We move them forward. So it's also very interactive. It isn't a drill and monotonous. It can be really fun and engaging for students, but it is based on what they know and what they need. And so the thing that I would like to say is that after they've gotten that explicit instruction that you described, Jennifer, is then we make sure they practice that and apply it in a text, immediately in a text, so they can see that it's not just that I've learned that A says ah, but oh my gosh, that unlocks a word for me and that unlocks a sentence, so that then they're motivated to become a reader. And we start them with decodable texts where they have some success. They're working on reading the sounds that they've already been explicitly taught, so they have what they need to know to be successful in that reading. And then as they've mastered that, we move them on into more difficult texts. So there's a time when children are very young where they need decodable texts, where we kind of monitor the types of texts they're using so they can be successful and have practice on what they've learned to master it. And then we can let them go once they've learned those skills. So we don't keep them learning the same thing over and over. We use data to know when it is to move forward.
Okay, so again, old grandpa, social studies, I don't know how to teach anyone how to read. Granddaughter comes home and we've learned the short A sound, and come home and obviously she's colored the letter A, and they've tried to combine that. What do I do at home? Do I read books and have her point out the letter A? Tell me what the extension would look like make it easy for me at home. Help an old guy out here. What do I need to do tonight to just extend that lesson?
I would definitely say that's a great idea.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I'm feeling better now about myself.
I mean, that's definitely one thing. I tell parents, even they're in the bathtub and they have soap or they have the little suds, making an A, and saying, okay, this is an A, what sound? Anything out the playground. Just keep practicing, but seeing it in print and seeing it within a text is really great.
I think we also, it isn't just that the information comes in, but also that it goes out. So giving them that opportunity to make up and create words that have that sound in it, to expand it that way, whether we're writing it or just oral language. So once you've learned the sound of b, you can then create lots of different words that start with that sound or end with that sound, and you can play a lot of sound games, nursery rhymes, things that we have kind of pushed aside actually have a lot of educational value. Rhymes, nursery rhymes, opportunities for fun songs where kids can practice language.
So in the early years, we have been talking about the oral language development. We still are a little bit, but oral language more of I'm speaking to the child and I'm watching the interaction as the child starts to just acknowledge that there's some kind of oral language happening. What I hear you say now is I still do that, but I need to also listen and have the child create at home and let me take a little bit of a back seat from time to time and let them develop.
Yes.
One of the most important things I think that can happen at home is for children to learn to not just provide but receive information and take turns in a conversation, because that's going to help them throughout life. Being able to be a good listener and take turns and going back and forth with one topic, staying on topic, being able to talk about something for 3 or 4 or 5 opportunities to take a turn to engage in the conversation will help build their understanding that they are a communicator. Like they are able to get their needs met, their wants met, they can help other people, they can continue to learn.
Okay, so all right, but I've been reading the papers. Well, does anyone read the papers anymore? I've been reading the social media online. Okay, I've been reading wherever I get my information, and it seems like that no one can read anymore. I read about these people that are, are illiterate. We're not reading at grade level. The NAEP scores, this national test that we give to all states, it's down. If we're doing this work so well, what's the struggle? What's going on in the early grades? What should Are we doing the right things? What do we need to be doing more of? Talk a little bit about that.
One of the things that has happened, or that we are working to change, is with the years and years that we used balanced literacy.
Can we describe that, Lori?
We can, where we provided reading instruction at a child, what we would call an instructional level. We would give them a running record and assessment to find out where they were really accurate and that they could read a lot of that text. We would then instruct them at an instructional level. Because we thought that's where the best instruction occurred. And sometimes students remained in that instructional level for a long period of time, so they might have never been in front of a grade level text. If they were struggling at all, we kept them in a lower level text until they showed us they had mastered that before we allowed them to move to a more difficult text. But by doing that, sometimes our students never were in front of a grade level text. Maybe they were in third grade and never really saw third grade text. They were working at a second grade or a first grade level text. And the research now shows that if we teach students at a grade with a grade level text, or even a year above, and we've scaffolded and helped them understand what they need to do to access that text, that they will gain at a faster rate than if we kept them in a lower level text and tried to move them forward from there. So a lot of years of balanced literacy, and Jennifer can give her opinion on this too, but a lot of years of teaching using leveled texts and keeping students at an instructional level rather than a grade level has allowed a lot of students to move through school without really accessing more difficult texts.
In that whole era, or whole language before it, and I'm a Dick and Jane reader kid, so, a lot of see Dick run, see Spot. Jennifer, what's your background? You talked great about what's currently going on. How was reading good, easy for you? How were you taught to read? How were you trained to teach people to read?
So I was lucky. My mom was a first grade teacher, and when I grew up, they taught phonics. And so I didn't have my mom for a first grade teacher, but I remember we had the Dick and Jane books, but we also had the decodables, and we were constantly working on the letter and the letter sounds. So I think that gave me a passion from when I moved away from Louisiana to somewhere else to really see that is what needs, because my oldest, reading didn't come easy for him. So I knew I had to do something to help him. And then I taught gen ed, but I also taught special ed K through 12. And I wanted to help my students. And it was noticing when I had my 6th, 7th graders, it did go back to science and social studies. And sometimes they didn't want to go because they hadn't been exposed to that text. It was way above them. So I started doing a little bit more push-in with them and just exposing them and taking it back and scaffolding that text so they could be successful. I know a lot of times we think, oh, well, they can't read that. Well, how do you know? I tell some of the teachers that it might be a struggle for you to sit there and listen, but it's not for them. Most kids are enjoying, they're excited. If they get one more word, that's great progress.
Jennifer, it's so good, and I'm going to put a plug. What Jennifer's just talking about, go back and listen to the previous podcast about rigor and about high expectations, about what we want for kids, and we're also building core knowledge, which is so important to the comprehension part, which we'll get to in just a second. So, and I kind of want to move into that. So, okay. So now this phonemic awareness, which the sounds of letters and phonics, putting it to what does that letter look like in print. And I'm even getting into my sight words, and I'm starting to read early readers. What then makes me go from there to being able to interpret Shakespeare? I mean, that's way down the road, but where's the transition? And then because I hear, the science of reading, you're teaching phonics again. Is it just that? No, you're shaking your head. Okay, so you again, enlighten me. What do we need to do now? We've got to do this. It's not we don't do this, but even if we do this, we have to do more. Especially as they get older. What is that? Where do we go?
I'll start and then I'll let Jennifer.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things I think we need to realize is that teaching reading isn't just decoding. Like we've talked a lot about letters and sounds and that decoding and using decodables. But starting at birth, when kids build their vocabulary, they learn about the world. You go out, you travel, you go to the grocery store, you look at those things, you're in the kitchen, you're talking about the whisk, whatever. When you have that exposure, and for some students that comes from reading, having a teacher or a parent read aloud to them. You're exposing them to new vocabulary. Because words that you have heard are easier for you to read, and words that you have heard are words that you will tend to use then as you become a writer and as you converse with other people. So the idea that reading is just decoding needs to be, we need to recognize that that's just a piece of it, that building background knowledge and content and vocabulary is what's going to move us beyond. So that's how you're going to get to Shakespeare, is by being exposed to some Shakespeare. Someone's going to read you a passage of Shakespeare and talk about how difficult it is and how you have to really take time to navigate a really difficult text, but we can do that. We can figure this out together. That's going to take a skilled teacher. At least most of the parents I know don't sit around reading Shakespeare to their kids, but usually we have that experience in school when we are navigating hard texts.
And that process starts early as they're decoding print also?
Yes. I mean, even the oral comprehension, where you've orally read to them, you're asking them questions about the text and seeing what they can derive from the information they're hearing. So it is comprehension's right along with everything as it's going, and that vocabulary. Vocabulary is so important. Making sure students know, I always give the example of the word straw. So if you're reading The Three Little Pigs, and I got this from one of Lori's teacher leader consultants. She had done this in a PD I did with her. But if you're reading The Three Little Pigs and you say straw, what is the first thing most students think of? A straw you drink out of.
Right.
We have students that have never seen straw or hay. So having that vocabulary, having those visuals for students to really put that is so important.
That's an excellent example, because again, if we just said, tell us about the comprehension of The Three Little Pigs, and I don't know what straw it is my sippy cup straw, then that's a lack of background knowledge and vocabulary. It's not a lack of reading.
Right. Yes.
I can decode it. I know what the word is. But I have a different meaning for that word.
And being a military spouse, that was something people think when we were stationed in Germany, oh, you get to see so many things. And teaching over there, I had students that never left the base because dad was deployed, mom didn't get her German driver's license. And so they didn't have a lot of background knowledge about things. So that's the reason it's so important to have that vocabulary, bring things to show them, let them feel it. You know, if you're talking about something that's pokey, bring them something that's pokey and they can feel it. So I think not assuming that your students know the meaning of that word or exactly how it's to be used is really something important. And it goes back to what Lori was saying, that direct, explicit instruction.
And you know, parents, no one knows a child better than a parent to know what they're really on fire about, really interested in, because a student's vocabulary will skyrocket when they find that thing. For one of my grandkids, it's fishing. So he can read back when he was in second grade and developed a love of fishing, he could read a really difficult book about fishing because he was motivated to read a really difficult book about fishing. So that's, I think, one of the other thoughts I would love for people to realize is that partnering a family with teachers to understand that they're coming together to help do what's best for kids. Because for families to share with the teacher, here's what they're really interested in, here's what they're excited about, that helps teachers find the right book, find the right materials that will be motivating to help them persevere. Because learning to read is hard. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, it does for many kids. It takes a lot of effort. And when our kids were little, so every summer we were going to take a trip somewhere that was educational and then fun. So one year, for example, went to Washington, D.C., but as we drove, because we drove all these trips, they had to read about what we were going to see, and then they got to experience it, and then we would have vocabulary in like Colonial Williamsburg, and you could dress up, and we would talk about it. And then, you know, the next morning we'd be at Busch Gardens riding a roller coaster to give them a little bit of break, and then we'd repeat. But it was just so important to kind of combine, because I wanted them to have all these varied experiences, because in Kansas, while they may have known straw, they didn't know other terms that they certainly had not seen an ocean. They could talk about an ocean, but visualizing that was much different than when they actually saw the ocean and, oh, this is not Milford Lake, right? I mean, this is much different. And we sometimes don't think about that sometimes for our kids in any of our communities, what they know is the 2 or 3 blocks around their house.
That's the beauty of a public library,
Yeah.
too,
Yes.
that there is an opportunity to open a door with every book.
Yeah.
So if you can't take that long trip, you can have a teacher or a parent read about that experience, and then the beauty happens when you talk about it.
School is back in session, and that means more buses on the road and more kids crossing streets. Kansas law is clear. When a school bus extends its stop arm and flashes red lights, all drivers from both directions must stop. Passing a stopped bus isn't just illegal, it's dangerous. Slow down in school zones, watch for kids at bus stops, and always be ready to stop when those lights start flashing. Let's work together to keep every child safe on their way to and from school.
We've mentioned this, but I want to be explicit now. What's Kansas then doing about the reading problem? Let's again, for people that don't know, I know the two of you are like, doesn't everyone know what we're doing in Kansas? I certainly think that, and then I find out, no. What are we doing in Kansas to ensure that every child can read well?
Well, we're focusing on the 4 fundamentals.
Okay, what is that?
That would be structured literacy. It's right top of that
Which
list.
is what we've been talking about.
Structured literacy, making sure that we align our instruction in Kansas to the state standards, which will give everybody a great roadmap for what kids need to know and be able to do. Balanced assessments, that we use the assessments we have to make sure that we're giving kids what they need. We understand what they can do and what they need help doing and can provide the best instruction. And then high quality instruction, which helps all of that come together so that we not only know what we need to do for students, but we know what materials to use, we know how to engage them in the instruction that they're being provided. So one of the things that kind of ties also that together is the fact that the State Board of Education has required that structured literacy be used as a method of instruction for reading, which is that explicit, systematic, using data, making sure it's cumulative, things build in a logical sequence to make sure that we do the best for students in the classrooms.
And I feel like the state also, that parent communication, that's something, putting this out for parents, not only educators, but having those community-wide reading nights. And I feel that is something that has been really pushed, especially in my district, is teaching parents how to help their students. Because for a lot of parents, it's not that they don't want to help their student, they're just not sure what to do.
Sure.
So giving them the tools that they can help their student and being explicit, just not just giving them a paper and say, hey, go home, do this. Have them come in, do the activities with them.
So years ago, I graduated from a great university in Kansas, Kansas State University. Kudos to my alma mater. Social studies teachers, you said. And the minute I got out and got a job, I was notified that in order to re-license, I was going to have to take a course that was never offered during the time that I was at Kansas State. It was called Exceptional Child because we had a movement into special education during this time. It was fairly shortly after the federal law went into effect, and so I had to go back to school in the summer and take this class. Well, we've done something very similar to that. Maybe it's been a long time, but we had this thing called a seal of literacy. Why in the world would we want to know, and let's use the word force. We force that someone's going to have to show us that they have knowledge of everything we've been talking about. Shouldn't I just trust that we have that? Tell me about the seal of literacy. What's the assurance? What's the good? What's the bad of this?
Well, the seal of literacy is just to make sure they know about the science of reading. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. Having taught about the science of literacy to tons of teachers, we don't know what we don't know. And so I think there's always something to learn and a different ways to do it. So I think making sure that everyone has the best knowledge and most recent knowledge to help students.
I know you've been dealing with that a little bit this week. So, we ask the hard questions
Yeah.
here on the podcast.
I think it is an assurance that everyone has, and I'm just going to say a base knowledge of what the science of reading is, because the science of reading will change. But this allows us a verification, if you want to call it that those who are in classrooms who are really tasked with teaching children to read and supporting those who struggle, that they have a level of knowledge to do their job and do it well. And I know when I took the training that would allow me to have the seal of literacy, there were still things to learn. And I also think there needs to be an understanding that seal of literacy that's on a license doesn't mean we're done learning. That our districts might want more for our teachers and might want to provide them additional training. And it is what we ask for in Kansas to assure that those who are in front of students know what they're doing to the best of what the science of reading has informed us they should be doing. But there's still going to be more things to learn. Like right now, we're really learning a lot about developmental language disorder. There's always going to be new things that we will need to build our own knowledge of. So.
1980s, the commercial was the egg frying in the pan. This is your brain on drugs, right? Don't do drugs, because if you do, and you're an adult and you kill off these brain cells, they never grow back. And then unfortunately, or fortunately, it's a double-edged sword. Combat veterans started coming back from the Persian Gulf, and for the first time, they were severely injured and living. This was because medical technology had gotten good enough, and we literally had people that had lost half of their brain. And what the cognitive scientists found out is that the other half tried to relearn it even at age 28. Mm-hmm. And we learned that no, while yes, that brain cells they can still regenerate. Now I say that because when you say the science of reading is this today, tomorrow we're going to know more. And we have to pass that information on as we get better at learning how the brain functions, especially for kids where it's hard to learn to read. Mm-hmm. So we have the seal of literacy, and every teacher in elementary school and special education by 2028 has to either pass an exam, which students in college today have to do, or they have to go through a training and pass that training in order to have the seal of literacy. And I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it. I don't have to, but I wanted to model that out. And honestly, I've learned so much that's helping me as a grandpa and helping me, I think, be a better commissioner. But we have just a few minutes left, and I want to talk about what's the future then of where Kansas needs to go to take the people that you work with every day, Jennifer, or that you work with every day, beyond just the seal of literacy or beyond just letters training or this foundational level. Where do we need to be going to ensure that Kansas stays on the forefront and making sure that we're doing everything possible to help kids and families learn how to read?
Well, one thing what we've been talking about is that keeping up on your research, making sure we're looking at things that are peer researched, making sure we're using activities or anything we're using has that research and peer reviewed. I think that's very important. I would also say being open, because even some of our highest, grand researchers are saying, you know what, I'm rewriting this because things have changed. The more we know about the brain, the more imaging we get, we're seeing these things. I just think we have to be open to know how can we reach our students, and constantly having that informal and formal observations, collecting that data, not just to collect it, but to use it to help our students, and communicating with families. That is huge. As a mom, always wanted to know, yes, I was in the district. I might have been in the same school as my kids, but I still wanted to know, how are they doing? Not as your colleague, but how is my student doing? What is their strength and what is their weakness? So we can work on the strength to build their weaknesses up.
That's excellent. Where are we going?
Well, what you were talking about, those 4 fundamentals, I think that's going to be the roadmap to get us there, because we have to use that data to make sure we're doing what's best for kids, but also to continue to learn from the research to stay current on all of that. Like I said, I know that's something my team's working on all the time, and so is Jennifer's. But I think we also have to look not just at reading as something that happens in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. We have to look at how do we support those kids that have made it to middle school and high school and struggle. Because if you look at the application, we did this with my grandson. We ended up getting him a passport for a holiday gift when he wanted like $400 sneakers. No way we were going to do that. So got that.
Tough.
I know, totally tough. So we decided to get him a passport. He wanted to travel. He'd never been out of the country. So at Christmas time, I wanted him to have something in ramp, so I downloaded a passport application. It's 3 or 4 pages of technical reading and writing. So it isn't just that we might keep kids from getting some, higher degree, that seems difficult. Sorry. But it restricts them to fill out an application to be in the military or a driver's license or a rental agreement. We have to really look at our students all the way through, pre-K through senior year, to make sure they have what they need to be successful and do what they want to do. And also our kids that have special needs too. I have a grandson with Down syndrome, and he's 4. He loves books. I have great hope that he will be a reader, and he's going to find a teacher in his district. I've met some of his teachers. They're amazing in the district where he is in Kansas. They moved back to Kansas because of strong public schools. And so I have great hope that he will be a reader, because he's going to find the teachers that know how to come alongside him and provide the best instruction for him. So we have to look at our special needs population. We have to look at our middle school kids, our high school kids, and make sure everybody has that opportunity to be the best reader they can be. Absolutely.
Again, just a few minutes left, Jennifer. What are you most proud of going on right now in the Gary County schools and the work that you're doing? We talked before we went on air just how the school year is going. You said they're remarkable. So just brag a little bit on what you're really, really happy about, what's going on.
Well, I think one thing is definitely seeing the teachers excited about teaching reading. We have done it where we talk to across grade levels. My English teachers are talking to the science and social studies teachers. What are you talking about? Hey, we're doing this in writing, or this is one of the prefixes or suffixes that we're studying this week. Can you introduce this? Social studies teachers are saying, hey, we're doing this HGSS. This is what we have to follow. Could maybe during ELA you use these terms that kind of helps, and they're building those gaps that were so hard for students. We have over 200 teachers that are trained in letters. Not just teachers. I have people high school teachers. I had 2 high school English teachers last year that was like, I want to take this. And PE teachers. And it's just amazing, because what we've said in our district, if you touch a student at any moment, you need to know how to help them to read. And it's just, I think our teachers are starting with our superintendent all the way down, we've realized that this is where we need to help our students.
That's excellent. Gary County Schools doing remarkable work. From a state level, what are you most proud of right now?
I am most proud of the teams that we've brought together to help provide professional learning across the state, and I'm excited about what we have going on in the next several months with that. And the fact that the state board has really made a commitment to doing what's best for kids and making sure all kids can read makes me really happy, and makes me very hopeful for the future of Kansas kids.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. I got to see some amazing teachers yesterday in Council Grove. Just one example, but I was there yesterday. Talked to some amazing teachers in Manhattan last night. I was on the campus of Kansas State and just ran into some people that I know. And Jennifer, you mentioned Gary County. We've got some wonderful examples. Every teacher in Kansas will have a civil literacy in the elementary school by 2028. Jennifer, Lori, this has been a remarkable. I think I can talk for hours with the two of you about the work that you're doing and the work going on across the state. We hope this has been enlightening for you, and we hope that you reach out to the teacher, to your school if you need more. What can I do? As a parent, or my kid looks to be struggling, or ask for things to come home and engage, because I know the teachers would love to help those extension activities. Get rid of the tablet, get rid of the phone. It's a great device, but it needs limited use, especially in the early years. As you mentioned, that oral language communication and a lot of print, a lot of experiences. Go to the zoos, go to the parks, go to the library. We're sitting right here in the Shawnee County Library where we shoot this, and I'm so grateful of these facilities. Parents, want to say thank you, and we want to hear from you. And so in future episodes, you know what we're going to start doing, ladies? And too bad we couldn't do this time, but in the future, we're going to actually take questions from parents. They can submit questions, and we're going to answer some of those on the air. So if you have questions about your child's education in the state of Kansas, simply email us at Insight, INSIGHT, Insight Podcast, so all one word, Insight Podcast at KSDE.gov. Anything about your child's education, about what we could talk about, and we're going to select a few of those each month, and give some shout outs to parents, and also try to answer those. We've developed this Insight Podcast at KSDE to hopefully reach educators and parents, not just about the great work going on in schools, but the challenges in schools and challenges we have as parents and grandparents and caregivers. And we're grateful that you tune in. We want you to subscribe. If you like it, tell other people to subscribe. If you don't, let us know what we can do better, because we want to make this beneficial to you. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you next month.